This is the Story of You podcast. I'm Vahid Sadrzadeh. The Story of You podcast sharing the inspiring stories of today's leaders. Different guests, of course, from a variety of backgrounds and careers, are going to share their experiences with you in the hopes of being a source of inspiration and example. Our guest today, cannot wait to have an amazing conversation with him because I know it's going to be one. I'm honored to call a colleague, truly. Mike Brown currently works for the University of Notre Dame. He's a Milwaukee, Wisconsin guy, born and raised. So I got to give you that, Mike. Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
My home state.
Cheesehead through and through.
He's a graduate from the University of Notre Dame in 2001, also holds a master's degree from Cardinal Stritch University. And at Notre Dame, of course, Mike has numerous accomplishments, but among those and the activities that he's done, garnering the attention and the fame, of course, than when he was the first African-American leprechaun at the university. And in my estimation, this is just my opinion, don't share it with your fellow leprechauns. You are the best, one of the best to do it. So listen, man, it was awesome. And now, even through recent health challenges, he's garnered and deserved the title of children's author with the release of his new book. It's titled Little Netta's Gift, based on a true story, and it was published in December 27th of 2021. Mike will get into the date here and why it's so significant in just a little bit, but please welcome the incomparable Mike Brown to the Story of You podcast.
It's more like infamous.
Not at all.
I'll tell you, hey, thank you for a tremendously warm introduction, and I'll tell you, it's interesting hearing you talk about those things because it gets me to reflect on my journey and just all the things that have transpired right over a number of years. And so I'm filled with gratitude to even have this opportunity to engage with you as a colleague, as a friend, and I'm looking forward to our conversation, man.
Yeah, I just really appreciate you being here. I mean, I know, listen, I work with you, I see you work, and I've seen the work you've done up to this point, and you're just getting started. But, there's so many people that you inspire on a daily basis, and we'll get into that here in just a moment. I want to go back. Let's just start way back in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Let's go back. Tell me about growing up there and about, just coming up in Wisconsin.
Sure. So yes, born and raised in Milwaukee. My grandmother actually is the one who was from Arkansas originally, and she moved her children up to Milwaukee for work. Quite honestly, she ended up working in a bakery, in a factory up in Milwaukee, and that's how we got to the city. And then I was born, and we were raised. I'd say I call it low income, but high love. In that we didn't have a lot of resources, but we made the most of what we had, and we had a lot of love in our house. I grew up, Vahid, with my grandmother, my mom, my two sisters, two aunts, and two younger cousins, and we all lived in the same house. And so when I talk about a village and just a number of people that we support each other, are there for each other, we live together. I shared a room with my mother and my two sisters for the longest time. I was the oldest grandchild, so I finally moved up in the chain when I got my own room in the basement of our house. And so, but when I talk about a village and I talk about my family, that's the core of my family that I at least grew up with. Now I've got my dad, and I've got his mom and my great grandmother who are all around as well, and I have two brothers, and I love them dearly. But yeah, my core in terms of who I grew up with was with my mom and her mom and my aunts and cousins and sisters. So, but no, I went to a public school, my whole life. I was just very active, Vahid, and a little bit of everything. I mean, we talk about number one, church. Going to church was. I mean, when we talk about going to church, Vahid, I went to church 5 to 7 times a week.
Wow.
And so we're talking about Sunday morning. We did Sunday morning service, Sunday evening service, Tuesday night prayer service, Thursday night Bible study. And then I was in the youth choir. And so we had choir rehearsal, every other Monday. I was an usher in the church. And so we would have usher practice. I really love just being active in the church. I didn't really like just sitting. I like to be an active participant, right? And so being in the choir, being an usher, are some ways that I found that were good for me to engage in our church. So a church was a huge part of my upbringing. A lot of my references are references from, scriptures and different sermons that I've heard in my life, different songs that I've heard. A lot of my music is influenced by music that I grew up in church. And so that was a pretty significant part of my life, and it still is. And so that's a critical component. And then the other component I'll share about Milwaukee is that I really stayed active and engaged in the community there as well, right? So I was in middle school and high school there, but I did a lot of things where I tried to be really active in the community. I was part of a program called Inroads, and it was a program where I was able to get an internship while I was even in high school. And so that kept me very active outside of my normal education during the regular school year. And then I was also involved throughout my high school, and I was ended up being captain of our football team. Ended up being the student body or the senior class president. I finished up, I believe it was top 10 in our class at Milwaukee Vincent, which is the school I went to there, and just I thought it was an incredible experience. So that's kind of the summary of growing up. I worked for the Milwaukee Brewers. I was an usher it was used to be called County Stadium when
Did
I
you
was
do the
there.
slide? Did you slide with Bernie Brewer? That's all I got to
I
know.
did
I mean,
not. I did not. I met Bernie Brewer, but I have not. I did not do the slide. But I was there for the transition from County Stadium to Miller Park. So it was interesting to see how that evolved. Unfortunately, I missed the time where the Packers would come and play half of their home games were actually held in Milwaukee at County Stadium. I wasn't unfortunately working as an usher during that time.
well, what a time though. I mean, I remember going back to County Stadium, and we would find at Goodwill, they'd have these like garbage can grills that you can like, erect in the
Yep.
parking lot. And
Yep.
County Stadium was a special place. I
It
mean, it
was.
was different. You had to like go to a separate entrance to go to the outfield, and it was just an
Yeah.
old school stadium. But
Classic old school. Yep.
classic old school. But what an experience. And, you know, Mike, some of the qualities, I guess, what you're talking about and some of the experiences that you had growing up, you and I talk about it every day, it seems like, right? As to what Notre Dame students are and the example that they are, not only when they're in South Bend, but
Right.
when they leave the university, they
Right.
are examples. And it's like you basically carried that torch all the way up through high school into Notre Dame. And then, talk about the experience at Notre Dame, and not only that, but the decision going into, I want to be the mascot. I want to be the leprechaun of the University of Notre Dame.
Well, I'll tell you, you're spot on, right? The reason I do the work that I do and what we do now is because of the students. I come to work every day focused on trying to provide resources for students so they can have a great experience at Notre Dame, be challenged, get pushed, because these are the students who are ultimately going to be the people who are leaders in our world. And so that's really what drives me every day. And so as I reflect on number one, even going to Notre Dame in the first place, there's a 1983 grad. His name is Mike Peterson. He's actually the one who I met when I was an intern in high school. It was the summer before my senior year in high school. I had a part-time job working 4 hours a day, and I met him at this job, and he's the one that I happened to sit next to at a lunch that they had for me as I was starting the role. and he asked about, my grades and my my history and everything, and he started just grilling me, and I'm like, man, he's getting really into my life story here. And he talked about Notre Dame, and he's the one that really uh, made Notre Dame an option, for me in terms of bringing it into my light. I was actually going to Marquette. I was born and raised. I grew up going to Marquette a lot. I was on their campus quite a bit, on UW, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee's campus quite a bit. But I was pretty set on going to Marquette. Had a full ride, had full scholarship to go there and everything. And I was
which is
essentially lined up to
which
go.
is a great institution as well. I mean,
Love Marquette. Yep. Yep.
great institution.
Yeah. But nonetheless, when I started looking into Notre Dame and just the experience that was presented in terms of what could be offered there, it gave me a chance to get away from home and sort of spread my wings a little bit, just in a new area, a new environment. And so I didn't get a full scholarship. I got a partial scholarship, and I definitely celebrated the day I paid off all those student loans.
Right.
But I really came to Notre Dame, but he as a wide-eyed freshman. I didn't know anyone, right? I had no other friends that went to Notre Dame. I didn't know any professors. I didn't have a sibling that had gone there before me, or a parent, right? So it was an entirely new environment and experience for me. But I really tried to embrace everything that I now had the opportunity to experience, right? So I stepped on campus and started meeting people right away, started to get to know people that were in my dorm, people through different club activities and different volunteer opportunities. I started getting involved in going into the South Bend area and volunteering at the Charles Martin Youth Center, for example.
Hmm.
I played inter-hall football to continue my football career. And really it was during the football games that my roommates from my section in my dorm, they were the ones who planted the seed. It was in the fall of 1998 at a game. I can't remember the exact game, but they started looking at the Leprechaun, and I had a lot of energy, excitement, and passion from the stands, right?
Right.
And they said, Mike, you got to try out for Leprechaun. You got to do it. And so they're the ones who planted the seed and really ultimately convinced me to try out. And it wasn't something I dreamed of doing or anything like that. I didn't have it on my radar by any means. But when they said it, it really did plant that seed. I was like, maybe, right? But I'll tell you, Vahid, it's funny how life takes its turns, because I applied to go study abroad in London, and I applied that fall of 1998, and I was going to get the results of that in the spring of '99. And had I been accepted into the London program, I would have been in London in the fall of 1999. So I got that letter that said I wasn't accepted into that program in February of '99. And getting that letter, I was a bit disappointed, right? I was looking
Right.
forward to an experience of being able to go out of the country. And that letter changed my life in that I did not go to London. And therefore I said, well, why not try out for Leprechaun? So I tried out for Leprechaun a couple of months later and ended up getting it. Ended up getting the position. I was named the varsity Leprechaun. There were two Leprechauns at the time, and I was named the varsity Leprechaun, which did football and men's basketball games primarily from a sport perspective, but and some other sports as well, and then a lot of community service events and appearances as well. But yeah, that's kind of what happened and what led to it, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Well, and let's just say this too. I mean, the Notre Dame Leprechaun, the mascot, especially a varsity one, right? Because there's different ones now. There's a couple
Yep,
different
I think there are four
leprechauns,
now.
right? And it's an intense process to go through the audition
Yes,
process and try out. But there's a spotlight on you when you're the Notre Dame mascot, the Leprechaun. I mean, all eyes on Saturday afternoon nationally are on this stadium. Talk about the growth process there and maybe what you learned in those couple of years with the team.
Yes, so you're spot on, Vahid. One of the things about the Leprechaun as a mascot is that we don't wear a head, right? So it's us, it's the person,
Mhm.
and you wear a green, suit and your knickerbockers and your hat and everything, but it's you. And so there isn't really a turn off, turn on type thing. You are the Leprechaun essentially 24/7 everywhere you go. And so there's a responsibility, I believe, that comes with that, where you just have to carry yourself, I think, in an appropriate way, because you're essentially an ambassador for the university. And so that has its pressure in of itself. And I think for the most part, a lot of the people who try out for the role recognize that and know it going into it, right? So it's, like when you see the leprechaun, like, okay, that's the leprechaun. So that's one thing. I'd say I'd break it up into two parts though. The the energy that you bring and the enthusiasm that you bring, the excitement around being, with fans, that's something that for me was something that came fairly natural. I had been part of teams, right? I grew up in a village in a community environment. We cheered each other on all the time. Even when I was part of my football team, I wasn't very good, but I really tried to work hard to keep spirits high. So that part wasn't very difficult. But where it did get a little tricky, or not tricky, but where my biggest growth opportunity came from was trying to channel that energy and present myself in a more polished, professional manner, right? So I was a very, I'll call it, I can't think of a better word to use than raw. I hadn't been through any media training. I hadn't been through any public speaking classes or anything like that. So I came in very raw from that perspective. And plus, Vahid, I didn't grow up a Notre Dame fan. So I didn't know
Were you a Badger
some
fan
things.
growing up, or were
I
you
was well, I was Badgers because of my roots and my family. I rooted for the Arkansas Razorbacks, right?
okay?
So I was definitely more Badgers and Arkansas because those were my roots for football, and then Packers for NFL. But yeah, I didn't. I knew about Notre Dame, and of course I watched them on TV, and I remember vividly, right, the 1993 game when they beat Florida State at home. Like I remember where I was sitting during that game. It was 1 versus 2, so I know of Notre Dame, but I didn't really grow up knowing who the coaches were, who a lot of the players were, and a lot of the history. That when the fight song, I didn't know that. I didn't know the alma mater. I never knew the words. And so these are all things that I had to learn. And really I studied the fight song the entire summer after I got the position to make sure I got the words right and
Right.
and then the alma mater and everything. So that part was the new part and where I had to grow from that perspective into the role.
Well, and you know, you said it. Carrying the torch for Notre Dame, be an example, and you've been that really since you stepped foot on campus. And coming back to Notre Dame, being at Notre Dame now, um, I know you're very instrumental in some of the DEIU initiatives that we have in place now, and talk about Notre Dame 2022
Yeah,
versus you know Notre Dame 2002. And I know you're a big part of that because, listen, I mean, it's changed for the better. And
right, right.
Notre Dame has, the world has, and you've led that charge since you've come back.
Yeah, it's when I look at any school you go to, and I mean, I'll use Notre Dame as an example here, just from my own personal experience. I call it a personal journey. It's a personal journey that you go on with this place, with the people at this place, and how you engage and how you're included or excluded, and how you're treated, but also how you treat other people. I think plays a big part into that entire journey that you have. And so I feel as though Vahid, I went in with a very optimistic and open mindedness, if you will, when it came to being there. I knew what I was walking into, right? I knew I was one of a few Black people
Mm.
on that campus. I knew Even though I'm about 5'6.5", I was a bit more muscular, I believe, back in college. But I knew a lot of people would think, even at my size and my stature, people would probably think I'm there because I'm on some kind of athletic scholarship, and I wasn't. And so I knew what I was walking into, but I had to tell myself. I also knew, Fahid, that I was a child of God. I knew that I was blessed with gifts, and I knew I belonged at Notre Dame. And so I didn't let really anybody or anyone influence the fact that I didn't belong. I didn't have a lot of money that a lot of people had, right? When it comes to even getting a couch, for our dorm, or getting a TV, for crying out loud. People had subwoofers and sound systems, and I was like, I've got some napkins and paper plates that my grandmother packed for me, and that's pretty much it. But nonetheless, I never lost sight of the fact that I belonged, right? I knew it in my heart that this is where I was supposed to be, and that I belong. Unfortunately, right, not everyone's experience was like mine. I never was called, any kind of derogatory term. I never had to show my ID as I was in the library, right, studying like everybody else. I didn't have any bad experiences with the police or anything like that on campus, but unfortunately, some of my friends have.
Mhm.
And that's the thing. While I had a great experience and didn't have necessarily something like that happen to me, I fully recognize and fully acknowledge that it happened to other people, and it shouldn't happen to anyone, right?
Right.
Anyone that's to fill in that campus should be welcome, should be included, should feel kind of a warm presence that represents what the university, I believe, really stands for. And so when you don't have that experience, I think I feel bad for all the parties really involved, because number one, you got the person who's affected by it who doesn't feel welcome. At the same time, I feel like the rest of the community is impacted because they don't get to experience what that person can bring to the community. I call it, they enrich that community. The community is enriched by the people, and the people enrich the
Mhm.
community. And so that's what I believe back then, and I still believe it today. And that's why I really work so hard when it comes to our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, because I just think our community is enriched when we have a diverse set of people who are, representing university as we travel and meet with people all over the country to get new ideas, new ways of engaging with people, different perspective than what may be the standard narrative in terms of how we're supposed to do something, and what we're supposed to be doing in the first place, how we're approaching people. Is there another way that we could be doing something that may be different than what has been done potentially in the past?
Well, I have to give you so much credit, so many kudos, for bringing that back to the Notre Dame community, and coming back and to sharing your experience, not only here, but with Notre Dame students, because it's so critical. It is so critical that they understand this and they learn that, listen, you could do whatever you want to do. Don't let somebody box you in to
Right,
anything. You know,
right.
I told this story, I don't know, I think it was to my wife for the very first time, a couple weeks ago. Um, you know, you don't really see a lot of Vahid Sadrzadehs on radio or
No,
TV. You know what I mean? I
no,
mean,
no.
somebody from
It took
Middle
me a
Eastern,
while to pronounce her last name when I saw you on TV.
you know, somebody from Middle Eastern descent, right? I mean, that's, you know, they can box you into all sorts of categories, and they did. And for me, it was moving to southern Minnesota and changing my name, you know,
Wow.
because I didn't know back in 1999 how, the community wasn't used to that. And,
Right.
so when I moved into my TV role, the first thing I did was actually go to my news director and say, "So would you like me to change my name?"
Wow.
And he said, "No,
No.
you are who you are. Don't
Yes.
let anybody box you in or tell you
No.
what to do, or tell you how to do things because of
Right.
their belief. You blaze the trail."
Right.
And so I have to give you a lot of kudos, Mike, because you know Notre Dame needs you. The world needs examples like you who are gonna just do it regardless, because it's what you believe. So kudos there.
What was your name?
Oh boy.
Now
Now
you got me
now you're really
curious.
now, yeah, now. So Madison, Wisconsin is where I grew up. So that was
Okay.
my last name. And I grew up like you, rooting
Madison?
well, rooting for Brett Favre.
Okay.
So the initial name was Brett Madison. I'm like, nah, man, that just sounds that
Oh
just sounds kind
man.
of weak. So
Okay.
I went with Tyler instead. So Tyler Madison was the radio name.
Tyler Madison. Wow. Okay.
I'll put a picture. There's a picture of me calling a
Yeah.
hockey game. Actually, I'll put it up right here on top of our recording,
Oh,
so
but he
people
but
can
he
see.
sounds great. I love it.
Sounds just as good, doesn't it?
Yeah, I love it.
Thanks, man. Um, let's jump ahead here because I know last year, December 27th, 2021. Talk about the significance of that date, and talk about that beautiful book that's over your shoulder there, and little Netta's gift.
Sure. So that book, it's amazing. I told you it's hard to figure out where to start it, but I'll do my best. I'm trying to work on my brevity. That's my next next thing I'm trying to work on. But here's how I'll really sum it up, Vahid. So I told you that I grew up with my mother and my mom's side of the family primarily. I knew my dad, I knew my grandmother and my great grandmother, and I spent some good time with them, but I didn't grow up with them per se in terms of we didn't live together, and I didn't have the best relationship with my dad. Okay. It wasn't until 2019 that he and I had a heart to heart and really started our journey of healing to just have a better relationship with each other. Okay. And the reason that's significant is because the little girl you see, little Netta, who the story is based on, is based on a true story about my cousin. And this cousin of mine, her name was Netta, and that was her nickname, if you will. And so she's my dad's sister's daughter. Okay.
Mhm.
And December 27th is her birthday. And back in 1980, December 27th, she turned 6 years old. And I was one at the time. But at her sixth birthday party, which is 2 days after Christmas, there's some friends who came to her party, and they told her that they did not get gifts for Christmas. And she ended up giving away her gifts to her friends that day at her birthday party. So the book is
Mm.
based on that true story. It's a story that I've heard all my life, practically ever since I can remember, that my grandmother has told me, that my great grandmother has talked about, even my dad. Now, unfortunately, Fahid, my my dad's sister, my aunt, her name was Cheryl, and Netta herself, they were unfortunately taken away from us when Netta turned 9. So 3 years later, her and her mom were tragically murdered. And I was 4 at that time, and I don't remember them. But from what I'm told, from what my dad has told me and my mom has told me, they used to come pick me up from my mom's house and take me to the mall with them, take me shopping with them. So I've heard about them all my life, and I've heard the story about Lil Netta's, act of kindness and compassion. I've known that story all my life. It wasn't until 2020, Vahid, when the world changed quite a bit for everyone, that I actually just dug a little deeper inside myself and went on what I call a personal journey of discovery. And I started to reflect more, and I started to write. And then as stories came to me, I would write down my thoughts, write down ideas. I just wrote a lot of different reflections. I wrote a lot of different ideas down. And ultimately, my dad's mom was, she had a highway named after her. and they had a dedication of that highway in the state of Wisconsin. And that event, although I had to watch it over Zoom because we're in the middle of a pandemic, that event is what inspired me to look even deeper into her history and read about my cousin and my aunt even further. And it was on September 19th, which is a couple days after that ceremony, that I then had the idea to take my cousin's story and put it into the form of a children's book. So that's really what led to the creation of the book itself. Started writing the story down, and ultimately, essentially a year later, so September 19th, 2020 is when the idea came, and on September 30th is when we submitted the file to go to print, and then December 27th, 2021 is when the book was officially published. And so that was the journey of little Netta, and really the background of it. So 27th is her birthday. So it was very important for me I thought it was important to have the actual book come out on her actual birthday.
Well, Mike, to keep her memory alive and the memory of on basically 2 days after Christmas on her birthday, she gives away her presence
Yeah.
as an act of kindness and compassion when she's so young.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what an incredible, what an incredible story. What an incredible girl. I mean,
Yeah.
what else? I mean, through this process of writing this book and kind of digging a little deeper, as you said, what did you learn about your family? What did you learn about yourself?
Well, I discovered the ability to write. That definitely, I was more, out in front, people person, animated, like all that. But I never really been a person that enjoyed writing. I hadn't been a person that really put a lot of my thoughts down on paper, like I did, or in 2020. And really, that journey in 2020, it was a journey in which I just really tried to figure out what were my gifts. What were the gifts that I had to offer to this world that I maybe hadn't even discovered yet? And that was all because I had more time to reflect, right? I wasn't traveling, I was home more. I would go for runs and be able to think and process what's happening in our world, processing a global health pandemic, processing the murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery. He was running I Run, right? And so there were just so many things going on. And I finally took the time to just think about what it is, what can I do? How can I make a difference? And so as I dug deeper into that, I really just discovered, and this again, to sum it up, Vahid, I'm an invigorating force for good. And that's what I am. And no matter what I touch, no matter what I do, that's what I bring to the table. And so anything I choose to now pour my energy into, it's an invigorating force. So I'm the spark, I'm the energy, I'm the catalyst, right? And I figured out I've embraced that more. There were times where I was unsure about that, but now I lean into it more and I embrace it. That I have to be, because it's what I am, an invigorating force for good. And so that's what I really learned more about myself. And I learned about just when it comes to my family's history and the things that we've done across the board, right? And I look into the circumstances in which my great grandmother, navigated, and my grandmother actually on my dad's side had an agency that she ran for over 40 years. And so learning more about that and the work that she did, but then also at the same time that he knowing what my mom's mom, she picked cotton in Arkansas, and she moved, hard work ethic, trying to raise four children, having a grandchild. I mean, all the five grandchildren were in her house, right, growing up. And so I thought about her life as well. And so those are the things I had, those kind of two. As I went through that journey, I thought about both of my grandmothers mainly were kind of the big two pillars of it. in their lives. And I felt like now it's my time, it's my turn to do my part to carry this forward in my way, right? Or in the way that I'm supposed to carry it forward. I'm not my grandmother, I'm not my dad, I'm not my mom,
Mm,
I'm me. And
right.
so what can I do to bring my gifts to the table to make a difference in the world? And so this was just another vehicle through which that's now, being able to be done. And this, I mean, I that was part of the discovery, to be honest with you, is just learning that I am truly an invigorating force and force for good.
Well, and this is the exact reason why we're doing the Story of You podcast, Mike, because you know what? Leaders like yourself who have gone through it and not run away from it, but stand there and then give back. Go through it and then give back and then teach and then give back. That's why I'm doing this. And
Yeah.
having you share your story, share little Netta's gift and story is truly inspiring. So, thank you so much, Mike. And thank you for all you do, not only for, the world and for people who pick up your book. And we'll get into that in a second because I know
Yeah,
I want people to get it. Um,
absolutely.
and I see what you do as a colleague. You're inspiring. You have energy. You bring that energy that, you talked about back in the day. You still have that, and it's invigorating, and it's great to see because you inspire others every single day. And so I'm just honored to call you colleague and friend. And so thank you for that.
You're gonna get me all emotional over here. Hey man, likewise, man. It's been, great to see. I mean, I came back here in what, 2015, and I think you were here, I believe, when I you were here then, or in South Bend.
I was, yep.
And so, yes, I remember, from seeing you on TV to now seeing you in real life. So no, it's been an honor and privilege to be here with you and share. And I appreciate you as well, man. I do believe iron sharpens iron, and you talk about me inspiring you're inspiring me, right? You know the work that we do right now,
Mhm.
and so I'm happy to see you carry out and continue to use your gifts as well, through this show and what you continue to do, because I think it's good work as well. You know what I mean? And so this show is going to inspire a lot of people, and I'm thankful for the work that you do at the university, but also through this show. And so thank you, and you inspire me.
Oh man, thank you so much. If we can inspire a few people to go on and do the work and lead by example and to be an example for others, that's the hope here on this podcast. How now the important piece of information: how can people order Little Netta's gift? Where can they find it, Mike?
Sure. So through my journey of discovery in 2020, I came up with the name of a company, and it's called Solster, that I founded, right? So it's about stirring the soul. So we create experiences that enrich lives, by creating these experiences that inspire, empowerment, and action. And so every book, every show, everything that we touch through Solster is designed to inspire people. So nonetheless, if you visit www.solster, SOULSTIR.co, and so not .com, but .co, and then slash little netta, that's where you can get the book. And so, but you can also get other books that are coming ahead from Solster. Book number 2 is actually being released on March 17th.
Wait,
And
wait,
so
wait. Is this
excited.
breaking news on the
Breaking
podcast?
news, breaking news, breaking news. March 17th,
All
big
right.
announcement coming that day. And it might have something to do with the Leprechaun. So it's on
Here
March
we
17th.
go. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. Nice work.
But the last thing that and I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier, and I'll be as brief as I
Oh,
can.
no, please. Yeah.
The little Netta, the other thing I didn't mention or talk about, which is a very significant part of her story and what happened after she was tragically murdered. My grandmother actually set up a program where they would give out gifts to children in the community on December 27th. It was a program called Toys for the Children Santa Forgot, but God Remembered Through Your Gifts of Love. It was a very long name, but they ended up giving away a couple hundred of gifts to children in the first year. And then the program grew. It lasted for 28 years. This is after Netta was gone.
Okay.
And they ended up giving away gifts to about 2,000 kids a year throughout that
Wow.
program. And so the other critical component of the book is that we resurrected that program in December of 2021, where we took the proceeds, not all, a lot of the proceeds from the sale of that book to support an evolved version and resurrected version of that program, where we gave away 1,000 copies of the book to children in the community. And then on top of that, we actually gave away 831 gifts to children in the community as well. So we worked with United Way of Greater Milwaukee to help us with that program and raise the funds and use money from the book to really bring joy to the lives of a lot of children across 3 schools in Milwaukee that otherwise might have gone without during the holiday season. So that's a critical part of that book and the story, is the fact that we're trying to use it to also give back and support children in the community as well.
And can people do that, Mike, if they go to a specific link? Can they, is it the same link as well?
Same link,
Okay.
www.solster.co/Little Netta. And that's where you can buy a book. You can actually donate a book. And essentially there's information there about how people, if you wanted to maybe even make a gift to the program as well, you can. So we ended the campaign for 21. And so we're starting to kick it off for 22 as well now.
All right. Well, I'm going to post the links not only on YouTube in the description below, but you can find it in the description of the podcast as well. Mike Brown, man, I knew it was going to be a great conversation. Listen, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, man, and keep inspiring and keep doing the work you're doing, because you are making a difference. And I'm lucky to see it. I've got a front row seat every single day at Notre Dame. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Vahid. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on, man. And again, keep up the great work you're doing as well.
Thank you. This is the Story of You podcast with our guest today, Mike Brown. I'm your host, Vahid Sadrzadeh. You can find us online anytime at VahidSadrzadeh.com. Catch you in the next one.